What happens when one of the most powerful voices in television walks onto a stage where sharp opinions are currency, and one of the most outspoken hosts refuses to hold back? The lights inside the studio of The View were bright, almost blinding. The familiar theme music faded as the audience erupted in applause. For years, this stage had been the setting for fiery debates, emotional confessions, and sometimes unforgettable confrontations. But on this day, something different hung in the air. A quiet tension. The kind that makes even seasoned television producers glance nervously at each other behind the cameras. Before we go deeper into what happened next, take a quick moment to support the stories you love. If you enjoy dramatic celebrity moments like this, make sure you subscribe to my channel, The Truth Narrator, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you think. Your support helps bring more explosive stories like this to life. Now imagine the moment. The co-hosts sat around the iconic table, shuffling their notes, exchanging polite smiles. At the center sat the ever-opinionated Joy Behar, known for her razor-sharp humor and fearless commentary. Over the years, she had sparred with politicians, celebrities, and public figures alike. Nothing intimidated her, or so everyone believed. But today's guest wasn't just another celebrity. She was a woman who had built a media empire from nothing. A woman whose influence reached far beyond television. A voice that millions trusted. And when the announcer's voice echoed through the studio, "Please welcome Oprah Winfrey," the audience exploded. People rose to their feet instantly. The applause thundered through the room like a wave crashing against the walls. Some audience members even screamed in excitement. Oprah walked out slowly, smiling warmly, waving to the crowd with that familiar calm confidence that had defined her career for decades. But if you looked closely, something was different. Her smile was polite, controlled, almost measured. Joy Behar stood up with the other hosts, clapping as Oprah approached the table. The two women shared a brief hug, but the body language felt cautious. Not cold, just careful. As everyone settled back into their seats, the conversation began casually enough. Light jokes, friendly banter. Oprah spoke about her latest projects, her reflections on the changing media landscape, and the responsibilities of public voices in an increasingly divided world. The audience listened closely, nodding, laughing when appropriate. Everything seemed smooth. But behind the scenes, producers knew something. Joy Behar had a reputation. And she had questions. Questions she wasn't afraid to ask. As the conversation shifted toward media influence, Joy leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the table. Her tone still carried humor, but her eyes had sharpened. "You know, Oprah," she said, tilting her head thoughtfully. "People often talk about your influence like it's almost unmatched in television history." The audience murmured in agreement. Joy continued. "But influence also comes with responsibility. And some critics say that sometimes, when powerful voices step into certain conversations, they can unintentionally shape narratives in ways people don't question enough." The room suddenly felt quieter. Oprah remained calm, her expression thoughtful. "Responsibility is exactly why those conversations matter," Oprah replied gently. "When you have a platform, you have to use it to encourage dialogue." Joy smiled slightly. "Yes, dialogue," she repeated. "But dialogue also means being open to criticism." A few audience members shifted in their seats. Something was changing. The rhythm of the interview was no longer relaxed. It had slowed, sharpened. Oprah folded her hands on the table. "I've always welcomed criticism," she said. Joy raised an eyebrow, leaning back in her chair. "Really?" she said lightly. "Because some people feel that when someone reaches your level of influence, Oprah, the criticism tends to disappear." The audience gasped softly. The other hosts exchanged quick glances. This was no longer a routine interview. It was turning into something else. Oprah paused for a moment, just long enough for the tension to stretch across the studio like a wire pulled too tight. Then she smiled again. But this time, the smile carried something different. Composure, experience, and a quiet understanding that the conversation had just entered dangerous territory. "You know," Oprah said slowly, "when people have strong opinions about you, it usually means you're doing something meaningful." The audience applauded. But Joy wasn't finished. She leaned forward again, tapping her fingers lightly on the table. "Sure," she said, "but there's meaningful, and then there's powerful enough that nobody challenges you anymore." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Even the producers backstage leaned closer to their monitors. This was the moment. The invisible line had been crossed. Oprah's eyes met Joy's. For the first time since she walked onto the stage, her voice carried a slightly firmer tone. Are you suggesting I've avoided being challenged? Joy shrugged casually. I'm suggesting, she replied, that sometimes the most powerful people in media become so respected that no one dares to ask the uncomfortable questions. The silence in the studio was almost electric. The other hosts glanced between them, unsure whether to interrupt or let the moment unfold. Oprah leaned back slightly, studying Joy carefully. The tension was now unmistakable. Two television icons, two powerful personalities, and one conversation that was no longer just an interview. It was becoming a confrontation. The audience could feel it. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others whispered to the people beside them. No one wanted to miss what might happen next. Joy Behar had just done something many interviewers wouldn't dare attempt. She had challenged Oprah Winfrey live on television. And Oprah, calm but clearly aware of the shift in tone, slowly placed her hands on the table again. Her next words came out measured, deliberate. Well, Joy, she said quietly, if you have an uncomfortable question, I think this is the perfect place to ask it. The crowd reacted instantly. Gasps. Applause. A few shocked laughs. Joy's smile widened slightly, as if she had been waiting for exactly that response. Oh, I do, she said. The cameras zoomed in. The studio lights seemed hotter. And somewhere behind the scenes, a producer whispered the same thought running through everyone's mind. This interview had just turned into something no one could control anymore. And the real confrontation was only beginning. The moment those words left her mouth, the atmosphere inside the studio of The View changed completely. It was subtle at first. A shift in posture. A quiet rustle from the audience. The kind of moment where everyone instinctively realizes that what they are watching is no longer just television. It's history unfolding in real time. Across the table, Oprah Winfrey remained composed, but the calm confidence in her eyes had sharpened. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She was now fully aware that this conversation had turned into a challenge. And Joy Behar, leaning slightly forward with her signature half-smile, knew it too. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence stretched across the studio like a held breath. Then Joy finally broke it. Well, she said lightly, glancing toward the audience before turning back to Oprah. Since you invited the uncomfortable question, I'll ask it. A few nervous laughs echoed through the crowd. Joy tapped her pen against the table once. You've spent decades building what many people call the most influential voice in television. Your interviews have shaped public opinion, launched careers, even changed lives. Oprah nodded slightly. That's very kind of you to say. But, Joy continued, raising a finger slightly, some critics argue that influence like that can become almost untouchable. The audience stirred again. Oprah tilted her head slightly, listening carefully. Joy leaned in. They say when someone reaches your level of respect and admiration, people stop questioning them. And when people stop questioning powerful voices, that's when the real conversations stop. A ripple moved through the audience. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in her chair, glancing toward the producer's booth. Oprah's expression remained calm, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. Joy, she replied gently, are you saying that people haven't questioned me? Joy shrugged. I'm saying that sometimes admiration turns into something else, something closer to immunity. The room went quiet again. Even the audience members who had been whispering moments earlier were now completely silent. Oprah folded her hands together. For nearly 40 years, she said slowly, I've invited critics, skeptics, and opposing voices onto my platform. Her voice remained soft, but every word carried weight. I've built my career on conversation, not control. The audience applauded, but Joy raised her hand slightly, cutting through the applause. And yet, she said calmly, there have been moments when people believed your platform shaped public thinking in ways that weren't always questioned. A few gasps came from the crowd. Oprah blinked once. You're referring to? Joy hesitated for a second, then decided to push forward. Well, she said, some people believe that when a personality becomes as trusted as you are, the audience sometimes accepts what you say without debate. The tension was now thick enough to feel. Oprah leaned slightly forward. You mean they trust me? Joy smiled. Yes, she replied. But trust and influence together can be powerful. One of the hosts quickly jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. Well, Oprah's influence has certainly helped millions of people. The audience clapped again, but Joy wasn't backing down. That's absolutely true, she said, nodding. But influence can also shape culture in ways people don't always notice. Oprah's gaze stayed locked on Joy. And you think that's dangerous? Joy raised both hands slightly. I think it's worth talking about. A few people in the audience murmured. This wasn't the friendly celebrity interview they had expected. This felt more like a philosophical debate between two powerful voices in media. Oprah took a slow breath. When you spend your life encouraging people to think, question, and grow, she said calmly, you learn something important. Joy leaned forward again. What's that? That people will always interpret your influence differently. The audience nodded, but Joy wasn't satisfied. Yes, she said, but there's another side to that. Oprah raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Joy looked directly into Oprah's eyes. That sometimes the most powerful voices don't realize just how much power they actually have. The audience reacted instantly. A mix of applause and stunned silence. Oprah sat back slightly, studying Joy. There was no anger in her expression. But there was something else now. A quiet determination. You know something, Joy? Oprah said. Joy tilted her head. What? You're right about one thing. Joy blinked. I am. Oprah nodded slowly. Yes. The audience leaned forward collectively. Influence is powerful, Oprah continued. And anyone who has it carries a responsibility. Joy crossed her arms slightly. So you agree with me? Oprah smiled faintly. I agree that conversations like this matter. Joy chuckled softly. Well, that's good, because I'm not finished yet. A wave of surprised laughter rolled through the crowd. Even the other hosts looked slightly stunned. Oprah tilted her head with curiosity. Oh, Joy tapped her notes again. There's another question people have asked about your influence. The audience quieted instantly. Oprah remained calm. And what would that be? Joy took a breath. You've spent years telling stories that inspire people. But some critics argue that media figures with your level of authority sometimes shape narratives that others are afraid to challenge. The studio suddenly felt smaller. Oprah's smile faded slightly. You're asking whether my voice has too much influence. Joy nodded. I'm asking whether anyone should have that much influence. The words hung in the air like a thundercloud about to break. The audience looked back and forth between them. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was becoming a debate about power, media, and responsibility. Two women, two icons, both used to commanding the room. But now they were facing each other across the table like intellectual rivals. Oprah slowly placed her hands on the table again. Her voice remained calm, but stronger now. Joy, she said, the truth is influence doesn't come from power. Joy raised an eyebrow. No, Oprah shook her head. It comes from trust. The audience clapped loudly, but Joy leaned forward one more time. And what happens, she asked quietly, when trust becomes so strong that people stop questioning it? The applause faded. The silence returned. And for the first time in the entire conversation, even Oprah paused. Because the question Joy had just asked wasn't just about television. It was about something much bigger. And everyone in that studio knew it. What happened next would turn this interview into one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. The silence after that question felt almost unreal. Inside the brightly lit studio of The View, hundreds of people sat frozen in their seats, waiting for the next words to break the tension. Even the cameras seemed to move more slowly, zooming in on the faces at the table. Across from each other, two of television's most recognizable personalities held eye contact. Oprah Winfrey leaned back slightly in her chair, her expression calm but thoughtful. She had spent decades navigating interviews, emotional confessions, and difficult conversations. But this moment felt different, because this wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, and Joy Behar had delivered it without hesitation. What happens, Joy had asked, when trust becomes so strong that people stop questioning it? The words still echoed in the air. For a moment, Oprah didn't respond. She looked out toward the audience, scanning the rows of faces watching closely. Some people leaned forward with curiosity. Others held their breath, sensing that this conversation was about to cross another line. Then Oprah slowly turned back to Joy. You know something interesting about trust? She said quietly. Joy tilted her head slightly. What's that? Oprah rested her hands on the table. Real trust, she said, doesn't eliminate questions. The audience listened closely. It encourages them. A ripple of applause moved through the crowd. But Joy lifted a hand again. Okay, she said with a small smile. But let's be honest here. She leaned forward again, her voice a little sharper now. When someone reaches the level of influence you've had, Oprah, people sometimes treat their words like truth instead of opinion. The audience murmured again. One of the co-hosts glanced nervously between them. Oprah remained composed. My audience has always been intelligent, she replied calmly. I've never asked anyone to accept anything without thinking about it. Joy nodded slowly. I believe you mean that, she said. But perception matters too. Oprah raised an eyebrow slightly. And what perception are you referring to? Joy tapped her notes again, though it was obvious she didn't need them anymore. The perception, she said carefully, that when someone with your reputation speaks, people often follow. The tension tightened again. Oprah folded her arms loosely. You're describing influence, she said. Joy shrugged. Yes. And influence, Oprah continued, isn't something you take. It's something people give you. The audience clapped again. But Joy's expression didn't change. True, she admitted. But influence can also create blind spots. A few audience members gasped softly. Oprah looked directly at her. Blind spots. Joy nodded. Yes. She paused, letting the word hang in the air. Every powerful person has them. The studio grew very quiet again. Oprah's voice remained steady. And you believe I have them? Joy leaned back slightly in her chair. I believe everyone does. For the first time since the conversation began, Oprah's smile disappeared completely. Not out of anger, but seriousness. She leaned forward slightly now, mirroring Joy's earlier posture. Joy, she said slowly, you've built a career on challenging people. Joy grinned faintly. That's true. And that's important, Oprah continued, because questions push conversations forward. Joy nodded. Exactly. But, Oprah added calmly, there's a difference between questioning someone and assuming their influence is dangerous. The audience reacted with a mix of applause and murmurs. Joy lifted her chin slightly. I didn't say dangerous. Oprah held her gaze. You suggested it. Joy shrugged again. I suggested it might be worth examining. Another host finally jumped in, clearly sensing how intense the exchange had become. Well, this is certainly one of the most thoughtful discussions we've had here. The audience laughed nervously. But Joy spoke again before the moment could soften. Look, she said, turning slightly toward Oprah. Nobody denies the positive impact you've had. That's obvious. Oprah nodded politely. But, Joy continued, media power has changed over the years. Social media, digital platforms, global audiences, influence spreads faster than ever. Oprah listened carefully. And when influence spreads that fast, Joy added, people naturally start asking bigger questions about responsibility. Oprah leaned back again, thoughtful. Responsibility is something I've thought about my entire career, she said quietly. Joy studied her face. I'm sure you have. Oprah glanced briefly toward the audience again. Everything I've done has been rooted in one idea, she said. Joy raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Oprah answered without hesitation. That stories matter. The audience clapped again. Stories help people understand each other, Oprah continued. They create empathy. They connect people who might otherwise never see each other's experiences. Joy listened carefully, but her expression remained skeptical. Yes, she said slowly. But stories can also shape how people see the world. Oprah nodded. That's true. And that's exactly why influence should be questioned, Joy said. The audience reacted again. A few people clapped. Others looked uncertain. The debate had clearly divided the room. Oprah looked at Joy thoughtfully. You know, she said, what's fascinating about this conversation? Joy crossed her arms. What? You're questioning influence, while sitting on one of the most influential talk shows in daytime television. The audience burst into laughter and applause. Even some of the co-hosts smiled at the irony. Joy laughed too. Fair point. She leaned forward again. But that's exactly why we should question it. Oprah smiled faintly. And that's exactly why conversations like this matter. For a moment, both women simply looked at each other. The tension hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. What started as a confrontation had now become something deeper. A battle of ideas. Two experienced broadcasters debating the nature of influence, live on television. But the moment everyone would remember hadn't happened yet. Because Joy suddenly leaned forward one more time and said something that made the entire studio freeze. Let me ask you one last thing, Oprah. Oprah tilted her head slightly. All right. Joy's voice lowered just a little. After decades of shaping conversations around the world, Do you ever wonder whether the audience sees the real you or the version of you they've come to believe in? The question landed like a thunderclap. A few people in the audience gasped. Even the other hosts looked shocked. Because this wasn't just about influence anymore. This question was personal. And every camera in the studio immediately zoomed in on Oprah's face, waiting to see how she would respond. For a moment, the entire studio of The View fell into a silence so deep it almost felt unreal. Hundreds of people sat frozen in their seats. The cameras zoomed closer. And across the table, Oprah Winfrey stared calmly at Joy Behar after the question that had just landed like a lightning strike. After decades of shaping conversations around the world, do you ever wonder whether the audience sees the real you or the version of you they've come to believe in? A few audience members gasped again. Even the co-hosts seemed stunned. This wasn't just a question about media influence anymore. This was personal. For the first time since the interview began, Oprah didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the table for a brief moment, her fingers resting together. The pause stretched longer than anyone expected. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. On live television, that kind of silence feels enormous. But Oprah finally lifted her head again. Her expression wasn't defensive. It was thoughtful. "You know something, Joy," she said quietly. Joy leaned forward slightly, waiting. "That's actually one of the most honest questions anyone can ask someone in my position." The audience shifted in their seats. Oprah continued. "When you spend decades in front of cameras, telling stories, interviewing people, sharing experiences, something interesting happens." Joy listened carefully. "The audience begins to feel like they know you," Oprah said. Joy nodded slowly. "That's true. But the truth," Oprah continued, "is that no audience can ever know every part of a person." The room was silent again. Oprah's voice remained calm, but deeply reflective. "What they see is a version of you that exists in public." Joy tilted her head. "So you're saying the audience sees a character?" Oprah shook her head gently. "No." She smiled faintly. "They see a truth, but not the entire truth." The audience murmured thoughtfully. Joy crossed her arms. "That's interesting," she said, "because some critics say public figures carefully craft that version." Oprah didn't flinch. "Of course they do." The response caught everyone off guard. Even Joy blinked. Oprah continued calmly. "Every person in media shapes how they present themselves." She gestured lightly toward the table. "Hosts, journalists, celebrities, all of us." Joy laughed softly. "Fair enough. But the real question," Oprah said, leaning slightly forward now, "is whether that version reflects your values." The audience clapped. Joy studied her for a moment. "And does yours?" she asked. Oprah met her gaze directly. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. For a moment, neither woman spoke again. The tension that had filled the studio earlier had changed. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was respect. Two experienced voices who had pushed each other to speak honestly. Finally, one of the other hosts jumped in with a relieved laugh. "Well, this might be the deepest conversation we've ever had at this table." The audience laughed and applauded loudly. Joy smiled, leaning back in her chair. "I'll admit something," she said. Oprah looked curious. "What's that?" Joy shrugged. "I expected you to dodge that question." The audience laughed again. Oprah smiled. "I've spent my life asking people difficult questions," she said. "It wouldn't be fair if I refused to answer one." That line triggered another wave of applause. But what no one in the room realized yet was that the moment they had just witnessed would explode far beyond the walls of the studio. Because within minutes of the episode ending, clips from the exchange began spreading across social media. Headlines appeared almost instantly. Joy Behar challenges Oprah live on television. Oprah responds to toughest question on The View. Did Joy Behar just confront Oprah? By evening, millions of viewers were watching the moment online. Some praised Joy for asking a question many interviewers would never dare to ask. Others applauded Oprah's calm and thoughtful response under pressure. On platforms across the internet, the debate exploded. Was Joy too confrontational? Or was she simply doing what journalists are supposed to do? And was Oprah's response the mark of someone comfortable with scrutiny, or just a master communicator staying composed? Even media analysts began discussing it. Clips of the conversation replayed on news programs. Commentators praised the exchange as a rare moment of real discussion on daytime television. Because in an era of scripted interviews and carefully managed appearances, this conversation had felt real, unpredictable, human. Back inside the studio, after the cameras stopped rolling, the atmosphere had softened. The audience stood and applauded again as the show wrapped. Joy turned toward Oprah with a grin. "Well," she said, "that was fun." Oprah laughed. "Your idea of fun might be different from mine." The two women shook hands, both smiling now. And just like that, the confrontation that had electrified viewers around the world ended not with anger, but with mutual respect. But for the audience watching at home, the moment lingered. Because they had just seen something rare. Two powerful media voices sitting face to face, challenging each other openly, without hostility, without shouting, and without backing away from difficult questions. And that's exactly why this moment became legendary. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Joy Behar was right to ask such a direct question to Oprah? Or do you believe Oprah handled the situation perfectly? Tell me your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy dramatic, powerful moments like this from television history, make sure you subscribe to my channel, The Truth Narrator, like this video, and share it with others who love these explosive behind-the-scenes stories. Because here on The Truth Narrator, we uncover the moments the cameras capture, and the stories the world can't stop talking about.